There are 4 Gospels in the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and 3 of them, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, tell the story of Jesus in a fairly similar way. They are called the Synoptic Gospels because they share so much overlapping material, the same parables, the same teachings, the same general structure. But then there is John. And John does something so different that scholars have been writing books about it for 2,000 years. John does not include the Sermon on the Mount. John does not include the Lord's Prayer. John does not include the institution of communion at the Last Supper. John leaves out parables, healings, and stories that the other Gospels considered essential. But here is what John does include: 7 specific miracles, carefully selected, deliberately ordered, and he does not call them miracles, he calls them signs. The Greek word is semeion, and it does not mean a supernatural display of power. It means a sign that points to something, an arrow, a finger pointing past itself to something greater. John tells us at the end of his gospel exactly why he chose these 7 and not others. John 20:30-31. And truly Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. So John is not writing a biography. He is writing a courtroom argument. He selected 7 specific signs from hundreds of miracles Jesus performed because together they form a case, a theological case, a revelation of who Jesus actually is. And when you trace those 7 signs in the order John gives them, you discover something staggering. They are not random. They escalate. They build. Each one reveals a different aspect of Jesus' identity, and by the 7th, you have a complete portrait of the Son of God that no other gospel paints with the same precision. The number 7 matters. In Hebrew thought, 7 is the number of completion, 7 days of creation, 7 feasts on God's calendar, 7 seals in Revelation. When John chose 7 signs, he was telling you with the number itself that this list is complete. There is nothing missing. This is the full revelation. Let me set the scene before we walk through them. The year is approximately AD 90. John is the last living apostle. The temple in Jerusalem has been destroyed for over 20 years. Christianity is spreading across the Roman Empire. False teachings are rising. Gnostic groups are claiming Jesus was not really human. Other groups are claiming he was not really divine. John, in his old age, picks up his pen and writes a gospel that will settle the question once and for all. Who is Jesus? And he answers it with 7 signs. The first sign is the most famous and the one we already covered in detail in another video. It happens at a wedding in Cana of Galilee, John 2:1-11. Jesus, his mother, and his disciples are guests at a small village wedding. The wine runs out. Mary turns to Jesus and says, "They have no wine." Jesus tells the servants to fill 6 stone water jars with water. They obey. He tells them to draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. By the time the cup reaches the head waiter's lips, the water has become wine. And not just any wine, the best wine. The head waiter says, "You have kept the good wine until now." But notice what John writes at the end. John 2:11. This beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee and manifested his glory. The first sign, the beginning. And what does it manifest? His glory. The Greek word is doxa. It is the same word used in the Greek Old Testament for the glory of God that filled the tabernacle in Exodus 40 and the temple in 1 Kings 8. John is not subtle. The first sign reveals that Jesus is the carrier of the divine glory. The same glory that once filled stone temples now fills stone water jars and turns water into wine. The God of Israel has stepped into a Galilean kitchen, and the symbolism cuts deeper. The 6 jars were used for ceremonial purification. They represented the entire Old Testament religious system. Almost holy, almost complete. 6 is one short of 7, but Jesus does not destroy the jars. He transforms what is inside them. The water of the Old Covenant becomes the wine of the New Covenant. The same vessels, a different content. The first sign is a thesis statement for the entire gospel. Jesus has come to take what the old system could only point to and fill it with the reality it was always meant to hold. The second sign happens in the same chapter region, John 4:46-54. Jesus is back in Cana. A royal official from Capernaum, about 20 miles away, has heard that Jesus has returned to Galilee. The official's son is dying. He travels all the way to Cana on foot and begs Jesus to come and heal his boy before he dies. Jesus says something almost dismissive. John 4:48. Unless you heal signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. But the official does not give up. John 4:49. Sir, come down before my child dies. And Jesus responds with 7 words that will change everything. John 4:50. Go your way. Your son lives. That is it. No prayer, no journey, no laying on of hands, just a command spoken in one village about a boy lying in a bed 20 miles away. The official believes the word and starts walking home. The next day, his servants meet him on the road with news. The boy is alive. The fever broke yesterday at the 7th hour. The official does the math. That was the exact moment Jesus spoke. What does this second sign reveal? That Jesus' word has authority across distance. He does not need to be present to heal. His voice carries supernatural power over geography itself. In a culture where every healer had to touch, anoint, or be physically near the sick, Jesus heals across 20 miles with a single sentence. The same voice that spoke creation into existence in Genesis 1 now speaks healing into a sick boy's body from 20 miles away. John 4:54. This again is the second sign Jesus did when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. John is counting. He wants you to count too. The third sign is in John 5, the pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem, a pool surrounded by 5 porches where great multitudes of sick, blind, lame, and paralyzed people gathered. There was a tradition that an angel would occasionally stir the water, and whoever stepped in first would be healed. So the pool was crowded with desperate people watching the water, hoping to be the lucky one. Among them was a man who had been an invalid for 38 years. 38 years. Jesus walks up to him and asks a question that sounds almost insulting. John 5:6. Do you want to be made well? The man does not even answer the question directly. He explains his problem. He has no one to put him in the pool. By the time he tries to crawl in, someone else has gotten there first. He is a man whose entire identity has been shaped by waiting. Waiting for help. Waiting for a miracle. Waiting for someone to notice him. And Jesus speaks 3 words. John 5:8. Rise, take up your bed and walk. That is it. No water, no angel, no competition. Just a command. And the man who had not walked in nearly 4 decades stands up, picks up his mat, and walks. What does this third sign reveal? That Jesus has authority over time itself. 38 years of paralysis dismissed in a single sentence. The accumulated weight of decades of waiting reversed in a moment. But there is something else here. Jesus heals on the Sabbath, and the religious leaders are furious. They accuse him of breaking the law. Jesus responds with words that will change everything. John 5:17. My Father has been working until now, and I have been working. The leaders understand exactly what he is claiming. He is calling God his Father. He is making himself equal with God. From this moment forward, they begin to plot to kill him. The third sign reveals Jesus as the Son who works in perfect unity with the Father. The lawgiver standing above the law, the Lord of the Sabbath. If you are starting to see something here that you have never seen before, take a second and share this with someone who needs it. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next, because the next 4 signs go even deeper. The 4th sign is the only miracle besides the resurrection that all 4 Gospels record. The feeding of the 5,000. John 6:1-14. A massive crowd has followed Jesus to a remote hillside near the Sea of Galilee. As evening approaches, Jesus turns to Philip and asks where they will buy bread to feed everyone. Philip is stunned. John 6:7. 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may have a little. 200 denarii, about 8 months of an average laborer's wages. Not enough. Andrew brings forward a small detail. John 6:9. There is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But what are they among so many? 5 loaves, 2 fish, about a child's lunch. Jesus takes the bread, gives thanks, and distributes it, and somehow in his hands it never runs out. 5,000 men, plus women and children, possibly 20,000 total people, all eat until they are filled. And when they gather the leftovers, they fill 12 baskets. 12. The number of the tribes of Israel, the number of the apostles. John is being deliberate again. What does this 4th sign reveal? Look at what Jesus says the next day. John 6:35. I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. The crowd had been looking for free food. Jesus tells them they have missed the point. The fourth sign is not about lunch. It is about Jesus himself being the true bread come down from heaven. The manna that fed Israel in the wilderness for 40 years was a shadow. Jesus is the substance. The God who fed Israel with bread from the sky now stands on a hillside multiplying loaves in his own hands. The fourth sign reveals Jesus as the sustainer of life, the bread that satisfies the soul, the one who provides what cannot be earned, bought, or stored, just received. The fifth sign comes the very same night, John 6:16-21. The disciples get into a boat and head across the Sea of Galilee toward Capernaum without Jesus. The wind picks up, a storm rises, they are rowing against the waves in the dark, exhausted, terrified, and then they see something that makes them think they are losing their minds, a figure walking across the water toward them. John 6:19. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near the boat, and they were afraid. Jesus calls out to them, John 6:20, it is I, do not be afraid. The Greek phrase translated, it is I, is ego eimi, literally am. It is the same phrase God used at the burning bush in Exodus 3:14 when Moses asked his name. I am that I am. Jesus is not just identifying himself, he is using the divine name. And then the moment they receive him into the boat, they immediately arrive at the land where they were going. The journey that had taken hours of futile rowing is completed instantly. What does this fifth sign reveal? That Jesus has authority over creation itself. The sea in Hebrew thought was often a symbol of chaos and the powers of darkness. Psalm 89:9 says God rules the raging of the sea. Job 9:8 says God alone treads on the waves of the sea. When Jesus walks on water, he is doing what only God does in the Old Testament. The fifth sign is the divine name spoken on the divine throne, which in this case is the surface of the sea. He walks where only Yahweh walks. The disciples in the boat are seeing what no human eyes were ever supposed to see. They are watching their friend do what only God can do. The sixth sign takes place in John 9. Jesus is walking with his disciples in Jerusalem when they pass a man who has been blind from birth. The disciples ask a typical first-century question. John 9:2. Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Their entire theological framework assumes blindness is punishment for sin, either his own or his parents. Jesus handled that framework in one sentence. John 9:3. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. Then Jesus does something strange. He spits on the ground, makes mud with the saliva, and rubs it on the blind man's eyes. He tells him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. The man obeys, washes, and comes back seeing. For the first time in his life, he can see. And the rest of the chapter is one of the most dramatic legal dramas in the New Testament. The Pharisees interrogate him. They interrogate his parents. They interrogate him again. They keep asking how it happened, who did it, where the man is. And the formerly blind man, who has never been to seminary or studied theology, gives one of the most profound answers in all of Scripture. John 9:25. Whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see. What does this sixth sign reveal? Look at what Jesus says at the end. John 9:39. For judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind. The sixth sign is not just about a man's eyes, it is about spiritual sight. The Pharisees who claim to see are revealed as the truly blind. The man born blind, who has lived in darkness his entire life, becomes the one who sees most clearly. Jesus is the light of the world. He said it earlier in John 8:12, and now he proves it. The sixth sign reveals Jesus as the giver of sight to the spiritually blind, the one who opens eyes that have never seen, both physical eyes and the deeper eyes of the soul. And then the seventh sign, the most stunning of them all, the raising of Lazarus from the dead. John 11, Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha, is sick. The sisters send word to Jesus, expecting him to come immediately, but Jesus delays. He waits 2 more days. By the time he arrives in Bethany, Lazarus has been dead and in the tomb for 4 days. In Jewish tradition, the soul was believed to hover near the body for 3 days. By the fourth day it had departed. By the fourth day the body had begun to decompose. By the fourth day there was no hope anyone could be revived in the first 3 days. Lazarus was past the point of revival. Martha meets Jesus on the road, weeping. John 11:21, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Jesus speaks the most extraordinary words. John 11:25-26, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. He is not just claiming to perform resurrections. He is claiming to be the resurrection. He is the source of life itself. Then comes the shortest verse in the English Bible, John 11:35. Jesus wept. He stands at the tomb of his friend and cries. The eternal Son of God, who knew Lazarus before the foundation of the world, weeps over the grave of his friend, and then he commands them to roll away the stone. Martha protests, John 11:39. Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus prays, and then he calls out with a loud voice, John 11:43, Lazarus, come forth, and the dead man walks out, still wrapped in burial cloths, still bound in linen, but alive. The fourth-day dead body, the decomposing corpse, the man whose soul had already departed, walks out of the tomb because Jesus called his name. What does this seventh sign reveal? Everything. The first 6 signs build to this one. He turned water into wine. He healed across distance. He restored a man paralyzed for decades. He multiplied bread. He walked on water. He opened the eyes of the blind. And now the climax, he conquers death itself. Not just heals the sick, not just helps the dying, reverses the grave. The 7th sign reveals Jesus as the Lord of life and death, the one whose voice carries authority over the final enemy. The Greek word for resurrection is anastasis, to stand up again. And Jesus is not just performing an anastasis, he is the anastasis. He is the standing again of all who trust him. But here is what makes the 7th sign so layered. The raising of Lazarus is the event that finally pushes the religious leaders to plot Jesus' death. John 11:53. Then from that day on they plotted to put him to death. The miracle that proves Jesus has power over death is the miracle that sets in motion his own death. The greatest sign of life leads directly to the greatest demonstration of life. The resurrection of Lazarus is the dress rehearsal for the resurrection of Jesus himself. Lazarus came out of the tomb wearing burial cloths. Jesus would leave his burial cloths folded in the tomb. Lazarus would die again someday. Jesus would never die again. The 7th sign points beyond itself to an 8th event that is so significant it does not even count in the list. The resurrection of Jesus is not a sign. It is the substance. It is what the 7 signs have been pointing to all along. Now look at the pattern. Sign 1. Water to wine, the transformation sign. Sign 2, the official's son, the word across distance sign. Sign 3, the man at the pool, the authority over time sign. Sign 4, feeding 5,000, the sustainer of life sign. Sign 5, walking on water, the Lord of creation sign. Sign 6, healing the blind man, the light of the world sign. Sign 7, raising Lazarus, the Lord over death sign. Each one builds, each one reveals more. Each one answers the question John asked at the beginning of his gospel. Who is Jesus? And there is something else hidden in the structure. The signs alternate in scope. Some are private, witnessed by only a few people. Some are public, witnessed by thousands. The first sign in Cana is witnessed by servants and a few disciples. The 4th sign feeds thousands. The 7th sign is witnessed by an entire village and changes the religious politics of the nation. John is showing us that Jesus' identity is revealed both in private, intimate moments and in massive public displays. He is the same in both. The God who multiplies bread for thousands is the same God who quietly turns water into wine for a small wedding. The Lord who walks on a stormy sea is the same Lord who weeps at a tomb. Power and intimacy are not opposites in him. They are the same thing. And there is one more pattern that scholars have noticed. The 7 signs roughly correspond to the 7 I am statements Jesus makes in John's Gospel. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the true vine. Each sign demonstrates an aspect of who Jesus is. Each I am statement names it. The signs show. The statements tell. Together they form a complete revelation. the Word made flesh, performing what only God can perform and speaking the divine name out loud. So what do you do with all this? You do not need to see a sign to believe. Jesus himself addressed that. John 20:29. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. The signs were given to a generation that needed them. We have the testimony of those who witnessed them. We have the gospel that was written so that we might believe without having to be there. The signs were not for spectacle, they were for revelation. And the revelation they gave is preserved for us in the pages of John's gospel. But there is something here that stays with me. Every single sign in John's gospel meets someone at a point of need. The wedding host running out of wine, the father with a dying son, the man paralyzed for 38 years, the crowd hungry on a hillside, the disciples terrified on a stormy sea, the man born blind, the sisters grieving at a tomb. Jesus does not perform miracles to prove a point. He performs them to meet people. The theology emerges from the encounter. The revelation comes through the relationship. The signs are not abstract demonstrations. They are deeply personal interventions in the lives of specific people whose names John has preserved for 2,000 years. Think about a master painter standing in front of 7 canvases. Each canvas is different size, different subject, different palette. But step back far enough and you realize they are not separate paintings at all. They are panels of a single mural, a single story, the same artist's hand, the same vision, the same purpose. Together they form one complete portrait of one person. That is what John's 7 signs are. 7 panels of one mural, 7 angles on one face, 7 revelations of one man who is also God. And maybe the deepest thing here is what John leaves unsaid. He gives us 7 signs and stops counting. There is no 8th sign in his gospel. He could have included more. He says so at the end. But he chose to stop at 7 because 7 is enough. 7 is complete. And in Hebrew thought, the 8th day was the day of new creation, the day after the 7th. The day Jesus rose from the dead, the first day of a new week, was the 8th day. The resurrection itself is the 8th sign, the sign that exceeds the 7. The sign that does not fit on the list because it is the substance the list was pointing to. The 7 signs were rehearsals. The resurrection is the performance. The 7 signs revealed his identity. The resurrection vindicated it. The 7 signs were the evidence. The resurrection is the verdict. And the Gospel of John exists to bring you to the moment where the 7 signs combined with the 8th event, combined with the testimony of the apostles, all converge on a single question. Who do you say he is? Jesus once asked that question directly, not in John's Gospel but in Matthew 16:15. But who do you say that I am? The question has not changed. The 7 signs have not changed. The 8th event has not changed. The only thing that changes is what you do with all of it. Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus called that answer a rock, a foundation, something to build a life on. You do not need to wait for a sign. The signs have been given. They are preserved in writing. They have been read by billions of people across 2,000 years. And the same Holy Spirit who inspired the writing is the one who opens hearts to receive it. The water-to-wine God is still in the business of transformation. The healing from a distance God still hears prayers across geography. Walking on water God still meets us in the storms. The bread of life God still satisfies souls that nothing else can fill. The light of the world God still opens blind eyes. The resurrection and the life God still calls dead things back to life with a single word. The 7 signs in John's Gospel are not just history. They are a roadmap of who Jesus still is, and every sign was written so that you might believe, so that believing you might have life in his name. The first sign was a beginning. The 7th sign was a climax. The 8th event was a victory, and the invitation to believe is still open, still waiting, still as available today as it was on the day John wrote down the 7 signs from memory, an old man in exile, making sure the world would never forget who he had seen. If this opened something up for you, help someone else find it. Subscribe, drop a comment, even one word. Share this with someone who loves the Bible, and keep us in your prayers. God bless you.